I've been a sneaky little kinder reader boy. Welcome to another full review of a book on my YouTube channel here at Open Book Outdoors. There's a shorter one on TikTok. Hopefully you came from there, but if not, welcome anyway. Today we're going to be talking about Small Things Like These by Keegan. I brought my Kindle to work because it's been very slow. We've been having some winter weather, which means not a whole lot of customers coming in to buy lawnmowers and tractors. So I tend to keep my Kindle handy just in case there's an opportunity to get a few pages in. Well, I realized that this book, Small Things Like These, which was recommended to me by, I believe, Books Are Sick on YouTube and TikTok, or recommended to everyone, and I just saw his content on it. But I realized it was a very short book, and so I downloaded it on my Kindle, and it was really slow the last 2 days, so I read it. So here we are in another review here on YouTube for Small Things Like These. Very short book, so this will be a much shorter review, I guess, than we're used to of the two I've already done. But this book is a work of fiction. It is set in 1985 in Ireland. I forget the name of the town, but our main character's name is Furlong. He has a wife and 5 daughters, I believe. And he owns a business, or at least runs a business, that supplies material for burning, for heating and stuff. He supplies wood and coal to the town. Not particularly wealthy, but he is comfortable. And this book, to summarize it, will not take very long. Furlong is a man who was raised by his mother. He doesn't know who his father is. His mother was taken in by a lady named Mrs. Wilson, and most of the book is him thinking back fondly over that time in his life, that Mrs. Wilson took his mother and him in whenever his mother was like a runaway. I don't know if she was a runaway, but she was kind of like a teen mom situation, which was not cool there then, I guess. And so instead of her going to a convent or going to one of these nunneries that were reputed to kind of slave labor these runaway girls, which we'll get into later. But instead of going there, she was taken in by Mrs. Wilson, who gave her a good life, helped her to raise her boy. Mrs. Wilson has gone on. One of the people who worked with her, Mr. Ned, is still alive. We are approaching Christmas as the book starts, and really it's just a bunch of very small events that happen in this guy's life until a little bit bigger one happens. He's making his deliveries, he's going around, he's remembering Christmas time, he's remembering being a kid, and he's just thinking, just very introspective for this whole book. And he is continually, throughout this short 139-page book, considering the impact of small actions on the lives of others, and how small things can impact any person's life, whether it's your own life or whether it's the person you're doing the small act for. Really the main plotting of the story is one day he shows up at the convent to deliver firewood for Christmas. When he goes in there, a young girl begs him to, because he's there looking for the nun he's looking to see. A young girl runs up to him and begs him to take her out of the convent and just lead her to the river so she can drown herself. And that affects him a lot. So he's thinking about the convent. The nuns are really weird about it. The next time we see him arrive at the convent to deliver something, he's going to put coal in the coal shed. There's a girl in there who's been there for multiple days in the cold. She's, clearly defecated in this room. And like, she's been in there for a while. She asks Furlong to ask the nuns where her baby is. So clearly she's a runaway girl, or whatever. I don't know a good term for that kind of thing, but maybe just an unplanned young pregnancy that ends up at this convent, and he knows that the nuns put her in there. It's never really said, but he knows that. And so the nun, he goes in, he lets her out, gives her his coat, takes her back inside, and the nuns talk to him and have tea with him, and they chat with him, and he's very matter of fact with them. He He's kind of sassy with them a little bit, and he knows that there's something wrong, but he doesn't do anything about it. He leaves. The young girl, the one thing she asked him to do was ask where her baby is, and he doesn't do that. And he asks her name. This is all very close to the end of the book. He asks her name. She says her name, and he says, that's a boy's name. She says, well, my name's actually Sarah. But he leaves. And after that, he goes to visit Mrs. Wilson's old house, where Ned is, I believe. I could be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but just the general plot points are there. He goes, or remembers speaking with Ned. He doesn't actually go to speak with Ned. He goes to try to visit Ned, who was once lived there with Mrs. Wilson when he was a kid. He tries to go speak with Ned, but he's informed that Ned has been put in a convalescent center, so he can't talk to Ned. And he remembers a time when he spoke with Ned, and he asked Ned who his father was, and Ned's like, I'm not really sure. Your mom could have fallen into the arms of anyone back in the day. And then later, I don't remember the timeline as far as when he's told this, but there was a point where someone tells him that you look a lot like Ned. And he just had not put two and two together that it's possible that Ned could be his father. But knowing that Ned was just like a stable hand, not a well-to-do guy, he thinks like, well, maybe this guy pretended to not be my dad so that I could have better opportunities in life. So he thinks about that. And then after he leaves Mrs. Wilson's, he ends up going back to the convent on Christmas Eve to, I think, deliver their last load of wood. Goes to the coal shed where he just knows in his heart of hearts that girl is still in there. He opens it up. She is in there. He's like, okay, you're coming with me. And he takes her, gives her his coat, and they walk home to his house. And that is how the book ends, with him taking in this young girl who's in very much the same situation that his mother was in whenever she was pregnant with or had just given birth to him. And I thought this book was very, very good. I thought this book was very well written. It was very interesting to me. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, but as I mulled it over today and I began to think about what it meant and what it felt like to read, and even doing so kind of with my half attention on it, I think I got to give it 5. I think it's a 5-star book. I think it's really, really good. And the message is so simple. The message of this book is so simple. Despite it being kind of a disjointed little plot, it's really not too hard to understand that the impact of small things is far greater than the sum of the small things that you do. It really gave me this idea, or brought up in me this idea that our lives are really just so much small stuff. You have maybe 10, 15 really, really big moments in your life. You have 10 or 15,000, maybe even a million little moments in your life. Moments where you decide to help someone. Moments where you decide to be kind to someone. Moments where you decide to be generous, or, where you can decide those things. And this book really just brought to mind this idea and this truth that little decisions can make a sum of a very big life. And Mrs. Wilson made a little decision to be helpful and kind to a girl who was in a very difficult position, and that's what has given Furlong his life and his good life that he likes. And in the same way, a little decision from him to not make somebody pay for their firewood, or to take this girl home and figure out a way for her to not have to end up in this convent, is something that can turn her life into a big blessing. The book also gives you a little bit of, just as a side note, gives you some information on this. There was pretty much proven in Ireland at around this time that there were people, or that these convents were abusive to these girls, that girls would sometimes die there. They would be worked very hard. They would be paid nothing for their labor, and really they just treated them like slaves. And this was not a place that everyone kind of knew it. It was, you didn't really talk about it. And the book kind of gets that across too, that you didn't really talk about it, but these places, these convents, these nuns were were really bad to these girls. So you know I love a book that makes me think, and this book made me think. But also, it's a book who comes right out and tells you the message. At the beginning, it says the word, he thought about small things like these, and then at the end we see that this small thing is it's been all about. We also throughout the book get some vignettes of just moments in his life as they prepare for Christmas, things where he consciously makes a decision to, instead of look forward to what the next day holds, instead I'm going to be present and enjoy this act of making fruitcake with my family. But all in all, it's a good book. It's a very short read, so you can just eat it up in one day. It took me maybe an hour and a half to read this book total. The characters, the dialogue was good. Again, pacing great. Love a good quick read, and it just made me think. And it inspires me after reading it. It inspires me to think about the small things, enjoy the small things, and be kind and generous in small moments, because you never know years down the road how big a small thing could have been for someone. I really don't have, if I had to say one negative thing about the book, is that I had to look up a few Irish slang terms, or just the way the wording of a few things was a little bit confusing to me. But other than that, I think Claire Keegan just delivers a powerhouse of 139 pages, or however many it was, and I recommend you read it. If you have read it, please tell me what you think. Please, of course, subscribe to the channel, like that stuff, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.